So we're going to talk about 5G, the next G. We need to get rid of G's. We'll come back to that later. I'm going to start out with, well, what is 5G? What does 5G do? What do you get with 5G, you being a consumer? Okay. And then we'll talk about the issues to be addressed. And I've kind of started it as 19, 20, 21 kind of time frame. And we'll talk about what's going to be missing as well, and basically what's going to come bite us in the butt, because this is going to be ugly. And then we'll wrap it up. So IGR, I actually live in Austin here. IGR, we're a small market research company. I started it in, 2000, so a while back now. And we just focus on wireless. So when actually it's been 25 years now I've been an analyst, which is kind of scary. But when I started, wireless was like this little bit of the telecom market, and now we're this bit of the telecom market. I was just saying to the poor Comcast guys that the reason they exist is to feed the cell towers with backhaul, right? That's what cable networks are there for. Feel free to laugh at any point. I'll let you know when there's a joke, okay? And then the Comcast guys are smiling, so that's the good bit. So, all right, so what is 5G? And very, very misunderstood. This is the first time in wireless that we've actually had consumer press talking about 5G before you can buy actually the G, right? We didn't talk about LTE and UMTS and all that stuff in the Wall Street Journal and CNET and CNN and things like this. It was very much an industry technology and an industry trend. 5G is different. It's everywhere. I was at CES a few weeks ago, and you'd believe, there's a 5G toilet, right? And I'm not joking. There's actually an Alexa-powered toilet, right? So you do not have to push the button anymore. You finish what you're doing, and you say, Alexa, flush. And you think I'm joking. I'm not joking here. It's true. And the business model is made by Cola, C-O-K, was it? Cola. English cola, American cola. They want your data. They see a great business in data from flushing. Now, they can know all these things about me. I'm quite happy to tell them. I don't know what they're going to do with it. Anyway, nothing to do with this. So a little perspective first. Back in 3G, the goals of 3G were, number one, offer more mobile data to the masses, right? We had Blackberries back then, okay? We wanted more data on them. We did that. Number two, for the carrier perspective, they wanted to maintain control of the ecosystem, okay? And they did that. So you sold to an operator, the operator bought from the vendors, et cetera, et cetera. It's a closed environment. And then the thirdly was control the device ecosystem, right? So the carriers bought the devices, and you bought from the carrier. There was no Amazon. You didn't walk into an Apple store, right? Along came 4G, so the goal here was broadband for the masses, LTE, long-term employment, right? But more bandwidth, okay? We did that, right? So now we've got people like my son, who lives in a house in California with 4 other guys with 4 TVs on the wall streaming 4 football games at the same time over bloody LTE, and guess whose plan it is. But you can do that today, right? You can watch Netflix quite easily on an LTE connection. Secondly, the goal was to lower the cost of mobile data. We did that. If you look at the cost of 3G per gig, a gig was extremely expensive per meg. Now look at it in 4G per meg, it's a lot cheaper. The next goal was to virtualize the core network, which is the techie side of things is the back end of the network. Instead of being based on dedicated hardware, they wanted to get that onto virtualized platforms, off-the-shelf hardware, et cetera, in data centers and all those things. And not everybody's done that. They're moving in that direction, depends on the carrier, but we've got there. And then the final thing was open up the RAN to new vendors. So that means we're opening up the radios the basebands to new vendors other than the traditional guys they had purchased from. That they failed at. The operators still have to buy from the big established vendors for the radio networks. So along comes 5G, and then the goals become, okay, what are we trying to do here? Well, I want to open up an IoT opportunity. I want to get to machine type stuff like Ray was just talking about, right? I want all these things connected. Your Alexa toilet is not going to be paying $50 a month in ARPU, okay? You can take the poo bit of that and do what you like with that statement. But, you know, maybe it's a penny per flush, right? Spend a penny. Maybe that's what this means. But we need low-cost operations for the carriers to do that. If the carriers are going to make money out of you flushing your Alexa toilet, you've got to do it at a low-cost network. Secondly, reduce the cost of operations in general, just not the network, but managing the network, deploying the network, running the network. These things are complicated. When we started this network, this industry 30 years ago, we didn't think we were going to get to this point. Nobody planned for 5G. We didn't even know we had a 1G at 1G. So that's definitely, again, low-cost operations. And then enable new revenue streams, which we'll talk about in the next few minutes, okay? Which, again, comes back to low-cost operations. So the goal from the operator's perspective, from the carriers who are building these networks, is reduce the cost of operations, period. We've got to make more money at this and be able to make money out of revenue sources that are smaller, okay? So this is, you'll see this, you see various forms of this. The 5G Trinity, okay? So what is 5G? Mobile broadband, 100 megs per user, okay? Your LTE connection today will give you 10, 15, 20. The best I've ever seen was actually at AT&T's headquarters in Atlanta. I got 70 megs on my phone in there because they have every piece of technology known to man thrown in that building. It's great. Peak data rates of 10 gigabits per second. So if you're the only person in the cell at midnight with everything, the wind blowing in the right direction, you'll get about a gig, but the cell site itself could give you about 10 gig eventually, not yet. Low latency. I want to go less than 1 millisecond radio latency, and I want 10 millisecond round trip latency. I'm going to talk about this later on, but and I want to do that with high reliability. And then massive IoT, I want to support for 1 million devices per kilometer squared, okay? That's way more than we have today. That is a lot of Alexa toilets. We'll talk about that as well. So, first thing, what this is not, 5G is not a new spectrum band. It is not just millimeter wave. People say, oh, that's the 5G band. No. Millimeter wave bands that they're auctioning now, 28 gig, the 24 gig, the 39 gig, have always been there. The military use them. Anybody remember LMDS? Yeah, way back when? Well, we're coming back to that again. We've been here all before. So there is not a 5G band. There are bands they're trying to use for 5G, and they're trying to coordinate around the world, but there is not one 5G band. It's not limited just to the millimeter wave. Everything we have in LTE today, so 600 megahertz, 700, 850, 1700, 1900, 2100, etc., will get 5G. Simple as that. They will all migrate to 5G. And the reason for that, and I'll give you in a second. There is no new air interface. So every time we've had a previous G, we change the way the network talked to the devices, fundamentally, okay? So 4G went to OFDMA from CDMA and 3G. This time, OFDMA is LTE. We're still using OFDMA in 5G, okay? We just changed a few things around it, we tweaked it a little bit, but it's the same fundamental technology. So the techie geeks say, yeah, 5G is going to fail. Why? Because there's no new air interface. Oh, that's right. My son says, yeah, I'm not buying a 5G phone because, Dad, it's using OFDMA. No, he wants to get the NFL. He doesn't care, right? So nobody knows what that stuff is. So, but there's no new air interface, which does have implications we'll talk about later on. So that mobile broadband piece, that's where we are today, 5G phase 1. Release 15, so the standards, the 3GPP standards, the first standard of LTE was release 8. In the US, the first one we had was release 9. Right now, we're on about 12 or 13. The new stuff that's coming in now is release 14. It's also called gigabit LTE. Release 14, they drew a line in the sand and said, 14 is 4G, 15 is 5G. That's it. Any questions? Good. Moving on. They could have drawn the line at release 13. They could have drawn release 16. They chose 15. So, okay? That's how 5G is defined. Release 15 and beyond. Okay? The NSA is not the national security, whatever it is. It's non-standalone. That means that 5G network that's going in today needs a 4G network to tag onto. It's piggybacking on the back of the 4G network. Okay? For the other things down here, you'll see I've got release 5G phase 2 here, release 16 and 17. Okay? That massive IoT, all those little devices sitting there, that Alexa toilet is not going to use a lot of bandwidth. Okay? But it's going to be signaling all the time to the network. I'm here, I'm here, I'm here, he flushed, I'm here, right? That is what kills the network for IoT. 1 million devices per square kilometer going, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here, is a lot of load on the back end of the network and on the signaling channel. So what we do in release 16 is we have this new packet core in the back end, it's called new core, and it simplifies and streamlines that signaling process, which is why we can have massive IoT, but not until release 16, okay? And we'll talk about when that's going to come in. Low latency, we get that along the way. We'll talk about how we're going to do that, okay? So that's what 5G is. That's all you need to know. Somebody says, what's 5G? You draw that diagram. Just draw a triangle, bandwidth, massive IoT, low latency. So what does it do? It does that. So this is all the places we can think of getting revenue from 5G. Number one, mobile broadband, what you pay today. Okay? Average ARPU is about $57 in the US, varies obviously around the world quite a bit. We've done a lot of surveys on this. We just did one. Will you pay more as a consumer for 5G? And we told you what it would be. About 50% said, yeah, I'll pay more. That's the good news. Bad news is they'll pay $5 to $10 a month more, not $100, right? We're not going from $50 to $100 here. We're going from 55 to 60. And the bad news is ARPU is declining because of competition. And by the time you get 5G built, that $5 actually replaces the revenue you've lost. So the faster you can get to 5G today, the better off you are. Okay? Home broadband. Verizon and AT&T have launched their fixed wireless service. Verizon has it in Houston. Anybody live in Houston? I'm sorry. You have the Verizon home service? No? No. Is it available in your neighborhood? No. It's in 2 neighborhoods in Houston, and actually when you look at it, it's on about 2 streets in 2 neighborhoods. And if you go on Reddit, like I did, and do a little search, you'll find out that it's actually at one end of the street and not the other end of the street. You've got to live in the right place. I mean, literally. It's pretty limited, but it is out there. Entertainment, the Netflix package on your cell phone from your provider. So AT&T obviously can do this because they've got the DirecTV content. T-Mobile's launching TV service in June sometime. You'll get that Netflix-type package from a lot of people. So slapping on an extra $5, $10, $15 on your phone for a package of movies and TV, why not, right? Advertising, this is why Verizon bought AOL and Yahoo, to get the content, the ad delivery networks and management networks. So we can put advertising in there. If you've got a content stream going to the phone, you can insert ads. You can control it. Okay? IoT we talked about, and network slicing is the one where we take pieces of the network and dedicate it to specific users. I'll talk about this one a little bit later on as well. That is 5G. This is what I did over the holiday. I built this diagram. You think I'm joking. We decided we needed the 5G ecosystem, what does it do diagram. And this is what I came up with. So there's just about every application on there. And they've got all the cool stuff like the autonomous vehicles and things like this driving around and robots and things like this and drones flying around and all this good stuff. Okay? But the ones that really, you focus in on here at the home, I won't go through all of this, but the home, the commercial side of things, the manufacturing, transportation, and stadiums. If you put a bunch of people into a stadium and they're all watching a football game, they're all on their phone as well doing stuff. That's a lot of signaling, it's a lot of bandwidth in one place. Perfect for 5G, hence why a lot of the trials have been in stadiums. Okay? So you'll get these slides later on. I'll let you read this on the plane. And it's kind of fun stuff on there. All right, so what are we going to do with all these applications? So there's all these vertical industries, and there's all these different things we can do with 5G. So I'm going to go through some of these. I want to highlight a few things. So vehicle to vehicle, right? We're going to have all these vehicles driving around talking to each other, okay? So if I've got a vehicle and I've got entertainment in it, if I have children, right, and they're all sitting in the back watching Netflix, and that great 5G application, right? Bandwidth, need lots of bandwidth. So yes, I need high bandwidth. You can see at the second column there. Do I need low latency? No. My children do not need 10 milliseconds latency to watch Netflix, right? A second would be fine. Right? I mean, they are the future millennials, so we know they're impatient. Dad, it won't load, right? But I don't need low latency. So high latency is good here. Is it improved with 5G? Yeah. Instead of your poor children having to watch standard definition, they could watch high definition or ultra high definition. They're going to need 8K in the back of the Suburban driving to school, right? SpongeBob SquarePants in HD obviously is going to be needed. It's an application. You can decide if I'm joking or not. Is it improved? Is 5G needed? No, not really. I don't need 5G for that. So the things that you see the yeses are things where I need 5G. So things like, let's take one here. Forward collision warning. Two cars driving towards a four-way stop at 70 miles an hour. Okay? Okay, maybe it's not 70 miles an hour because they have a light. Maybe it's 50 miles an hour. Okay? And what should happen is, of course, they both should brake, right? Well, those two cars start talking to each other. And if they don't brake, you have a crash. So we want them to brake. But, one of them doesn't brake. Does latency matter in that situation? Yeah. If the network's spending 70 milliseconds just talking to the cars, 70 milliseconds at 70 miles an hour is 6 feet. Two cars, that's 12 feet. That's more than enough room to have a nice accident, right? So latency matters in that situation. Hence, we need 5G. My favorite one on here is actually, my favorite application is not actually not on here, but it's basically remote control of robots, right? Which is a 5G application, which has got huge industrial applications. I saw a presentation by Bosch last year. In a manufacturing plant, a high-tech manufacturing plant, it costs $1,000 per meter to put the fiber in to connect to an industrial robot. $1,000 a meter. So when they reconfigure one of these manufacturing plants, massive amount of money going into the connectivity. So like, hey, give me 5G, put a robot there and connect it with 5G, and I'll save $1,000 a meter, you can fund the 5G network really quickly with that, okay? Great application. The one that gets used for is remote surgery, okay? Remote surgery, guy in, doctor's in somewhere, patient in another, using fancy machine. It was actually demonstrated the other day. There was actually a story about this. So some poor person in West Texas has a car accident, is rushed to Alpine, Texas, emergency room. There's no doctor. The doctor's in Dallas. They say, don't worry, he's on the golf course, but he can deal with this. Pulls out his phone and does the remote surgery thing. And poor person in Alpine wakes up from surgery. They say, congratulations, you are the world's first robot surgery patient. And if they don't wake up because somebody forgot to pay the bill, then they're not the first. Who wants to be first on remote surgery? Hands up. Yeah, haven't found anybody yet. I've been asking for a year or two now. Never found anybody who puts their hands up saying, yeah, sign me up. Yeah, good luck with that one. So that's kind of the scary one. So you can see that there's some things that need 5G here. The key is that low latency. 5G gives us low latency. Bandwidth we can get with LTE, right? Remember, 5G is the same air interface, just with bigger spectrum chunks, okay? But latency is an architectural change. That's what we're buying with 5G. We're buying low latency. So, what are we going to do with it? This is the one slide you're going to remember. You're going to get back, your boss is going to say, what did you learn in Austin, you see? There's a drunk duck on the slide, right? So, your eye and your inner ear, right? The latency between them is about 13 milliseconds. So when you move your head, your eyes say the world is moving. Your inner ear says your head just moved. When those two get out of sync, you get seasick. That's motion sickness. So when you're on a boat, you're looking at the water's not moving. But your inner ear is going, whoa, the boat's moving, right? And your ear says, no, your eye says, no, it's not. You get motion sick. That's why you should always look at the horizon on a boat, because then you see the movement, okay? 13 milliseconds. If you get latency under 13 milliseconds, you do not get sick. Now, I've actually been asked this. Smart people do not have lower latency between their ear and their eye. So if you've got an MBA or a PhD, you're not down at 5 milliseconds, okay? It's the way you're wired, right? You can't train it, okay? Some of you, I'm not looking at anybody in particular, but it may be longer for some of you. I don't know. Maybe it's a little slower processing up there. I'm just saying. But 13 milliseconds. So, gaming, right? Fortnite. Let's take Fortnite. Kids play Fortnite. The next version of Fortnite is obviously augmented reality, virtual reality. Put the headset on, play Fortnite with all your friends over a 5G network. To do that, you need less than 10 millisecond or less latency. Otherwise, there's going to be kids all over the world throwing up. They turn their head, right? If you've tried the AR, VR goggles, and I know you had some here last year, if you try them, and I get really motion sick with those things, you turn them, it's because the latency is higher than 13 milliseconds, right? The gaming stuff that uses it today, the server is sitting right there next to you. So that's how they get over it, right? The application's sitting right there. But if I want to do massive gaming across the world or across the country with huge numbers of Fortnite players, I'm going to need a wide area network, and I need that 10 milliseconds. So is there an application for 5G? Yes, entertainment and gaming, right? But that AR, VR application extends into industrial as well, control of robots, right? I'll give you a really life example. I was in Singapore in November. The port of Singapore is huge, okay? They lose 30% of containers at any one time. They don't lose them. They know they're in there. They're not exactly sure where they are. So they have to send somebody out to go confirm that location and then move the container. So they send a guy out with a truck and a crane, they lift it on and move it to where it should be. They've done trials with 5G. They can get that loss rate down to 15%, which is a massive amount of money. So what they want to do now is instead of sending people out, which takes time, put them in a control center. So there's a bunch of guys sitting in a control center with control systems controlling autonomous vehicles that go out, find the container, put it on the back, and move it to where it should be. And the cost savings are insane, right? Easily pays for a network. We're not doing that with Wi-Fi because it's the Port of Singapore. It's huge. So we need a wide area solution. But you need low latency. Otherwise, they'd be driving on like drunken sailors, right? So latency is really important. That's why, okay? So when do we get 5G? Well, there's the number of connections in the world. We just published this. So this is the number of 5G connections in the world. And you're like, wow, it goes up really well. That's 1.2 billion by 2023. Like, rocketing. This is fantastic. We're already at, 7 billion connections already today for wireless. So for mobile, not even Wi-Fi and all those things. Today, we're down at a couple of thousand at 2018, but it really doesn't get going until 2020 when we hit about 50 million. So 50 million out of 7 billion, right? Asia-Pac is 81% of those connections because they've got half the world's population, and the Chinese are going at it like crazy, investing in everything to do with 5G, as is Korea. And India was really late to LTE. Not this time. They will not be late again with 5G. They've already made that very clear. So the world's two biggest nations in terms of population are pushing this really hard. Yeah? When a device connects to a network. Yes. But on this chart, this is using licensed, this is when you have a connection that is mobile or using a service provider. So if Ray mentioned like Wi-Fi, for example, Ericsson will tell you there's like 50 billion IoT devices going to be out there, right? Most of those are going to be Bluetooth, Wi-Fi. They don't use an AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon network, et cetera, right? So we just count the managed networks, if you like. Whereas North America's right here. We actually do pretty well in terms of growth, but we've only got 350 million people in North America, so we're kind of limited by population. And Europe's late on this. Europe is trying to work out how to make money from LTE, never mind about 5G. Europe has some problems right now, you may have noticed. I'm not even going to start on the UK having problems. As somebody said, Brexit could take the great out of Great Britain. I know. I left 30 years ago, really. It's just... We're broadcasting this, right? Yeah. All right, so this is I like this chart. This is one of my favorite charts. So when does the 5G revenue minus the build cost turn positive? In other words, when do we start making money out of this thing? So I'm going to invest all this money in 5G as an industry. When do I actually get my investment back, right? So what we did here was took the revenue and subtracted out the cost of building the 5G networks, which we have. This is for US, Europe, and Asia-Pac all combined. I threw it in one slide. We can do this by different regions. It doesn't vary that much. The lines shift a little bit by a year or so backwards and forwards here, but overall they're about the same. So I thought I'd just give you one view for it. And you could say, well, what about the operating cost? Yeah, you've still got OpEx, but you've got OpEx anyway for LTE, right? You still got that in there. Obviously, when somebody becomes a 5G subscriber, there's not a huge additional cost to that. The main cost is building these networks. So in 2018, you'll notice there's two little lines, 19, 20, 21. And you'll notice that the lines are all negative right up until 2023. So the blue line is each year, okay? So in 2022, that blue line just slightly goes positive. In other words, the annual build revenue exceeds the annual build cost in 2022 for the first time. It's like $1 million, so I don't really count it. It's really 2023 when we get to be, let's say, safe on an annual year-to-year basis. red line is cumulative. So take all of my build costs up to that point and all my revenues up to that point, right? And of course, I've had a lot of build cost early on with no revenues. So it's not until 2024 where cumulatively I'm getting my money back, right? And of course, we go into 2026, 2027. Today, we're all the way down here. So we've got, in the US actually, it's about 2023. You've got at least 4 years of investment without getting significant return, right? We are way early in this process, right? 5G is generational. It's going to take 10 years to start to really get the numbers up and get the money back, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, okay? And this is what concerns me with the industry is we're hyping this thing like crazy right now. Like it's around the corner, like everybody's going to buy 5G today. No, I mean, this is, a couple of years away before you'll even notice as a consumer. I mean, we've got these poor ladies having to live in Houston. They don't even have 5G, and it's in Houston. If you believe Verizon's marketing, you believe that all of Houston was covered with 5G right now, and it's 2 streets. So obviously not theirs. So let's talk about those issues. Number 1, slow rollout of 5G, fixed wireless, which I just talked about. Verizon's launched all these markets. They use pre-standard equipment. They did not use phase 1, called new radio. They used what's called TF. Why? Because they went to the standards bodies and said, you need to work harder. We're going to do this first. First. We want to be first. We want to be first. Why? We're Verizon. Please, we want to be first. And we've got our own standard. And if you don't do this, we're going to use this. And that's what they did. So they started deploying it. Now, they're actually taking out all that equipment they put in the last few years and putting in new radio. So, yeah, they were first. Congratulations. Now rip it all out. Get about 300 megs on a connection. It's pretty good. Some people are seeing as high as 1 gig. A lot of people are seeing 600 gig. 600 meg. So it's pretty good. We think the addressable market for millimeter wave is about 26.2 million households. Verizon says it's about 30 million. I think 26.2 is a better number because of 3 reasons. Number 1, it's got a decimal in it. Sounds a lot more scientific. Number 2, we came up with it. And actually, it's close enough to 30 million to be in the same ballpark. It's not like we said there's 15 million, they said 30 million, right? And we did the same methodology. And number 3, it's a marathon. And that's what this is. This is a marathon, right? Houston is like, they haven't even made it to the 100-yard mark yet, okay? It's going to take a long time. The adoption after 5 years of this stuff is less than half of the addressable market, okay? Way less. Ultimately, we don't get above 15 million households for this. So the Comcast guys like writing this down really fast, like, millimeter wave will not take over the world. Phew, right? That's the good news. The bad news is it's going to take a lot of people. There's a lot of revenue that's going to walk out the door there as well. So, and a lot of people believe they can do it. So, fixed wireless is not for everything. Wireless is hard. Slideware is easy. Wireless is hard. Fixed wireless has a ton of limitations, like trees, rain, water in the air is bad for millimeter wave. That's why they put it in Houston, right? It's flat with no trees, right? And it's relatively dry except when it rains and floods, right? They didn't put it in Boston or New England with all these big trees or upstate New York where my parents live. Oh, flat, don't like hills either, right? And all those trees, those big trees have leaves on them with water in them, bad. Then it snows, bad. Signal goes to pot. So Seattle, yeah, old Steve Yogo, he's not getting it in Seattle anytime soon, right? Too much water in the air. This is why climate change is good for millimeter wave. Fixed wireless in the lower bands makes a lot of sense. So we've got the 3.5 gig CBRS band, which will be auctioned later this year. So now we do see the cable guys. Comcast has been very public about this. I'm looking at the Comcast guys again, so I picked on them earlier. But hey, 3.5 gig service that signal goes quite a distance. The economics of building out that are quite attractive. There's a lot of bandwidth there, and you can get a very nice signal. So they could run, they've got fiber to the head endpoint and then run 3.5 gig radios from there and get a nomadic service as well as a mobile service as well as a fixed service. Quite attractive. But we won't see that until late 19 for the auctions or early 2020 probably now, since the FCC is actually shut down right now. 5G is not stable. This is a little bit of a problem. So I said that there's that phase 1 that was being deployed. They took the June version of that. They froze the standard in June. By September, they found 183 problems. 23 of those were major, meaning hardware change. So all the equipment that had been put in June didn't work anymore. Whoops. So they fixed those, and then they had a December release as well. But that was only software changes. This is what happens when you rush a standard, right? They were pressured into getting 5G out on that radio. So in 19, we're going to find more problems. There is no question. The question is, how bad are those problems going to be, and do they need a hardware change? It is conceivable there will be a problem found that will require a hardware change, and everything that has been put in needs ripping out. And that means radios, yeah.
So is the problem all with regard to latency?
No. The radio didn't work. It's like in your car radio. Imagine getting a car radio where, you could get all the channels except NPR, right? And you're like, well, I need NPR. Well, no, the industry said, no, you don't. And everybody else said, yeah, you do. Give me a new radio. That's the equivalent to what happened. These things are very complicated. It was actually to do with handoff of signals and connections. It didn't work. Whoops. But we don't know. I mean, are the problems going to be found? Yes. Do we know what they are? No. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a problem, right? We know about it. And we don't know the severity yet, but we'll find out. But I think it's highly likely we're going to find something that, if it's not a new radio, it's going to require a firmware update, which means somebody going out to the site, going and plugging something in, climbing up the pole, plugging something in to fix it. And that's going to be expensive. So that, stability of the standard, we normally work on these things for years. We scrunched 5G into a time frame to keep the boys in Bedminster happy. Mobility does not mean mobility with 5G. It means nomadicity. And I think that's a word. I kind of wrote it out. And I told somebody last week, come up with it in Swedish. The Germans, Audi had Vorsprung durch Technik as their tagline. Advanced through technology. Right? Nobody knew what the hell it meant, but it sounded really good. Vorsprung durch Technik. We need that with this. 5G, Affelbenögenen, or something, right? So nomadicity means you're going to be walking around with 5G millimeter wave, right? You could run. Riding a bike, that might be a problem. But walking around, sitting there, doing stuff like that, fine. You are not going to be driving up from Austin to Dallas on I-35 getting a 5G connection on millimeter wave. You're going to wait until we've got 600 megahertz, 700 megahertz signals to do that, okay? There is a great video on YouTube somewhere. Go search for NTT Docomo 5G racetrack, I think it is. And there's a car driving around an oval track at like 200 miles an hour. It's a Nissan GTR for you car guys. And maintaining a 5G connection. And Docomo is like very proud of this. They did a lot of press on this. And then they kind of zoom out and they show the radios, and they're literally 100 feet apart around the track, right? And then they showed this graphic of the signal getting handed off between, and I counted the longest it maintained a connection between radios, 2 seconds. Well, Austin to Dallas is, 200 miles. That's, what about million feet, is it? Something like that? Yeah. So we'd need, a couple 100,000 cells between here and Dallas. So, not going to happen. So nomadicity, not mobility. Very important. We're going to get some devices in 2019. Mainly in the middle of the year, Android devices. Samsung, Sony, Xiaomi, all these guys have announced them. You'll get quite a few in 19. You'll get a lot more in 20 in terms of volumes. 5G, iPhone, not until 2020. They're using an Intel chipset. Won't be commercial until later this year. If Apple goes for its regular launch cycle on iPhones, September of 2020. If they shifted earlier, it could be June. We don't know yet, right? The reason this is a problem is, or not a problem, is this means that half the US population won't have a 5G connection until late next year, right? I just bought an iPhone. I'm just going to wait on my regular upgrade cycle and go get a new one in 2020, right? Anybody Android users? 5 of you? Yeah, you can get them earlier. There'll be no network, so don't worry about it. You get a higher bandwidth with 5G new radio. Speed, speed, speed. So the machine, the hype marketing machine today is speed, 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 speed. The speeds you get on LTE are actually pretty good. So if you're standing in the right place getting a 5G network, you get a lot more speed. But again, what are you going to do with it? Faster Netflix? You can watch TV faster? Really? So in terms of revenues, come back to this chart. What do I get out of my revenue here for 2019? Network slicing comes later. We'll talk about that in a minute. But I won't get any IoT stuff because I need that low latency, remember? I need that signaling, right? And that doesn't come until release 16, which is, we're going to talk about in a second. Advertising, maybe I can squeak some of that in if I can link everything up. Entertainment, yeah, but nobody's launched a package yet. It's going to be later this year. So what I'm selling right now is speed, and the 3 people in Houston who can get it, home broadband, right? I'm being unfair. There's a few more markets than that. There's at least a dozen people. But I'm selling more speed, right? Operators have been really bad at selling speed. You sell packets of data, right? You sell, here's a package of 20 gigs, here's a package of 30 gigs. We don't say, you can have up to 10 megabits per second. Here's 50 megabits per second, right? Probably looking back would have been a good idea. We need that new core, this back end, the last few slides here. We need that with release 16 and 17 to get that full 5G feature set, okay? There's 13 functions in there that expand on what LTE's packet core does. The earliest you'll get this is late 2020. AT&T has actually started, they've been very public about this, they've actually started talking to vendors and soliciting bids for this. And the other operators are doing the same, just haven't talked about it as much. So the earliest it'll start to go in is late 2020, in reality 2021, okay? That low latency and high signaling throughput therefore becomes 2021. So now in 2021, what do my revenue sources look like? Now they look like this. Network slicing is a little harder to do. Network slicing says I'm going to take a piece of my network and dedicate it to a specific function, right? Good example is FedEx. They want to put radios into all their trucks with cameras so they can monitor the truck, okay? Normally, they just need a black and white picture every 10 seconds. That's fine. Do that today, no problem. Something happens to the truck, right? Driver pushes a button, panic button, something. Software on the camera realizes there's something wrong. They take complete control of the truck. They close the doors. They lock it. They may drive the truck remotely, away from a danger or something, right? That's 5G. And that means they go full high bandwidth, low latency service like that. Today, it takes about 10 minutes to automatically reconfigure a network to do that. Bit of a problem if your truck's on fire. Like, don't worry, we're reconfiguring the network. We'll be with you in 10 minutes, right? So it's got to get down to a second or two to reconfigure the network. And the networks can't do that today. It's going to be years before they can. But a network slice that says, hey, there's a football game at UT on the weekend. We're going to need a bit more bandwidth up there. Let's reconfigure the network on Saturday to do that. That's a scheduled or a planned network slice. We can do that today, okay? And they do that. Patience. Patience. We need to just chill our heels as an industry. Just cool it. This is going to take time. There's no iPhones yet. How can it be real? Heck, there's no Android devices. How can it be real? So everything in the hype cycle says it's here now. Again, consumer marketing is like this. The realistic time frame is in 2018, we had a few cells launched. In 19, we're going to get more deployments, nationwide stuff, actually. T-Mo's 600 megahertz is using release 15, new radio. Again, the first devices start getting launched. 2020, we're going to get some more of that mid and low band spectrum being used. A lot more devices, including an iPhone, and that new core comes in. 2021, now we're getting to real 5G, right? Low latency stuff, high signaling throughput. True 5G services. And then 2022 onwards, more services and devices. Okay? So we're way ahead of the curve on the marketing and the hype side. This is worse it's ever been. So 19 is a transition year. Lots of overpromises, lots of overhype coming, lots of confusion, which is good for consultants. We love it when there's transitions of technology and everybody gets confused. This is the most confusing one we've had yet, which is excellent. My son graduates college in June, nearly done paying for him. It's going to be a great year. Lots of questions about the real value. Why is this different from LTE? What are the new apps? When do we get more devices? But you know the answer. It's speed, speed, speed now, and then it's latency is the value, low latency. And we just need to chill it. You know, the key here is getting the applications demonstrated. The enterprise is key here, really is. Getting more applications in there. And don't get sidetracked by consumer branding stuff. Just patience. That's it. Actually, I'm not that over time because Larry started 4 minutes late. So therefore, I'm actually on time. So, yes?
Okay, but if you could put up your graph that you drew over the weekend.
You mean the one that's at the beginning?
Yeah. I have a question. You've got two.
There
No,
Oh,
right
oh,
there.
oh.
We just passed it.
Okay. Yep.
Now you get the low latency. Now we've got we've got this big towers all over the place.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Am I understanding this correctly? To get the low latency, we have to have many more quote mini towers around.
Not to get low latency.
Okay.
No.
What will I get? I mean, I'm going to the FedEx example.
Yeah.
Where can that be done through the existing towers, or does something else has to be added?
Yeah, good question. So the answer is yes, I can do it with the existing towers. This will be 5G, right? It won't be 5G with millimeter wave spectrum at 28 gig. This will be at 600, 700 LTE bands, right? But the speed down to the truck here, I've got a truck on here somewhere. Actually, there's one there. It's an ambulance. It's the same type of application. They want to be able to, they want to be able to do triage in the ambulance while you're on the way to the hospital instead of waiting until you get there, right? Perfect application. So that's going to want a high bandwidth, low latency connection to it. You can do that over that macro cell. The trick is that the application running that and all that content is sitting up in the cloud. The time to get from here to the cloud and process and get back is 100 milliseconds or so. That is too long for remote surgery. So I want my application sitting somewhere here, right? So you hit the tower, straight down to the application, process it, and go back. And that's 10 milliseconds, right? That's the trick. Yeah. So the cloud providers here, Google, Amazon Web, Microsoft, there's actually an announcement coming in a few weeks with one of them to do exactly what I just said. They're starting now to push their applications down to edge. So if you're a developer, you fill a form out today on Amazon Web Services saying I need this much resources for my application. You will actually check, I want the edge, I want this location. And we're not there yet. I mean, it's a couple of years away. So yeah, but that's what I need.
You mentioned also the crash protection, the
Yeah.
crash. Is that requires, what is required on this diagram to be able to do that?
Yeah, so here's my two cars heading towards each other here. Well, this one's about to hit that truck, that autonomous vehicle. There you go. If I take that signal and take it to here, right, and then send it up to the cloud and process it and bring it back and send it back to the car saying stop, that's going to take about 100 milliseconds, okay? And it's going to crash. So what I want to do is take it to, on this picture, to be here to here, process it, send it back. And actually, that one would be a priority application. That would be in the range of less than 5 milliseconds. Because these radios start to recognize, ooh, that's coming from an autonomous vehicle. That's an autonomous application. I need to process that now, whereas the patient can wait another millisecond or two. Right?
Ian, I thought that macro cell was going to be way too far away from that car to get the bandwidth it needs. But I guess you're saying you don't need a lot of bandwidth.
I need bandwidth.
So you don't need a fat pipe. You
No.
just need speed.
I need speed. No, I need low latency. Speed.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're not selling full color images here down to the car saying stop, right? You're sending one byte that says stop, right? Yeah. Now, if you want to do autonomous AR/VR down at the car, right? So you're in the car and put goggles on, which is the dumbest, stupid idea I've ever heard. But
Do it all the time.
They've talked about it all the time, yeah. Then I am doing image processing and sending image. Image processing is massive bandwidth, right? That will happen here at the edge. So that's different. Yep.
Where are the scooters?
Your
diagram
hopefully
doesn't
in
have
a
scooters.
dumpster somewhere being set on fire, those damn things. Have you tried walking through Austin these days? There's these psychos flying at you in all places. They think they've got the right of way. I cycle through Austin on weekends, and it's like suicide. You got to get your muscles out, those idiots.
So if you need to process that data at that macro cell,
Yeah.
are you going to require then a small data center?
Oh, yeah. Edge
each
compute.
micro cell?
Edge compute, and we have a session on that this afternoon.
Okay.
So yeah, so these locations, this location, I mentioned the stadium, doing stuff in the stadium. You got 50,000 people here wanting to do something. Makes no sense to send those requests to the cloud and back again. Process it here. So you have, so this becomes a mini data center. It's happening already.
Well, and you also mentioned a little bit ago about needing 100,000 mini cells between here and Houston. How does that relate to what you're talking about now?
Well, right now we have about 300, what the heck was that?
Somebody's phone.
You want to put the duck back up? There's about 300,000 towers in the US today. There's about half the number of cell sites as that. There's about half the number of small cells. We need, in 5G to do this, we need about 1 million small cells. That's what we've got to build. Yeah, we got a lot of work to do, and that's why we didn't even talk about regulatory issues and limitations on that. That's a huge problem.
Okay.
You're just talking about cities though too, right? Populated areas.
Yeah, we're not building 5G where there's nobody. Yeah.
So do you think the existing fiber network is enough to support this, or do you think that there's still going to be a big investment in fiber?
So we have a session this afternoon, actually. Jim's going to be talking about fiber. We're actually having a session this afternoon on fiber and edge. My view, no, keep building. We got way more. And it's not so much I need huge amounts of bandwidth to go to these cells. One fiber can carry plenty of traffic, right? I need fiber in a lot more places, right? I do not need to be in the situation of saying, well, we've got to put the cell there because that's where the fiber is. I need the cell there, right? Because of where the traffic requirement is, get the fiber to it. Now that cost becomes prohibitive. Now we've got a problem. So just keep building fiber. You can't build too much fiber. Comcast and company, they've got obviously a consumer business. I believe that their bigger business and their bigger opportunity, and they being cable MSOs in general, is more fiber connection. They could be a massive backbone here. By definition, a cable network is where the people are because you need homes to buy it. These guys have not built out to Steve Yogo's rural areas to serve the cows because Cows only poo. They don't give you our poo. So.
We'll have time
I'm done.
for more questions during the panel and the other sessions, and which Ian's going to be heavily involved with. So
I'm here all day as well.
yes, good. That's what
More
I'm saying.
jokes.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ian.
Thanks.